Warning, incoming hostiles.
Welcome to Ware Gaming Weekly. Hello and welcome to Ware Gaming Weekly for April 23rd, 2019. My name is Nick. Next to me is Josh. Say hi, Josh.
Hi, Josh.
Hello and welcome to Ware Gaming Weekly for the week of April 3rd, 2019. My name is Nick, and alongside me is my own brother, Josh. Say hi, Josh.
Hi, Josh.
For your information, Ware Gaming Weekly posts every Wednesday on YouTube.com and on podcast services. And
If everything cooperates.
If everything cooperates. And you can find more about us at waregaming.com, and you can watch us live stream The Division 2 throughout the week on twitch.tv/waregaming_ when we're active.
Unless we're watching Smallville.
We are not always active agents. But yes, Smallville has taken over our home once again after 10 years of not watching the show. And that's Josh's fault. Only amplified by myself.
It was Spotify's fault because Spotify Premium comes with Hulu now. And Smallville was on Hulu. And so we started watching the first season on...
Despite the fact that we own all 10 seasons.
Well, the first season didn't work.
Okay, whatever. But still.
So we
had all this time to rewatch this show.
Yeah, but it was available. And then with the panel and everything, that it just kind of brings it back to the forefront of, like, man, I really miss that show.
I think it's really inside of you that's made me been thinking about it more.
Yeah.
With Michael Rosenbaum. And so, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to be getting back into it. Actually, I had dreams about it last night because I've been watching so much of it. If you want to be a part of the show, you can write in to weekly@waregaming.com, and you can tweet to us at waregaming_. So we have quite a light news week, but there's some heavy things some interesting things that we have to talk about. So we're going to get right into the who, what, and the where. And we're going to start off by talking about EA hit by massive layoffs. This is by Cameron Corliss at GameRant.com. Video game development has always been a volatile career field, but lately it seems as though more developers than usual have found themselves without jobs due to massive layoffs. Last month, news broke about Activision layoffs cutting 800 employees from its labor force. Now, EA has announced roughly 350 workers have been removed from its labor pool. The layoffs appear to have primarily affected employees in the marketing and publishing departments of the company, specifically in Japan and Russia. An email sent out to employees by Andrew Wilson, EA's CEO, outlined the publisher's goal for the company, stating that the layoffs would help streamline decision-making in the publishing and marketing departments. Wilson also stressed that EA's vision to be the best video game... let me try this again. Wilson also stressed EA's vision... Oh, wait, it did say that.
Yeah.
Wilson also stressed EA's vision to be the best video game company in the world.
I want to be the very best.
But that the company was not there right now. He explained that it still had to focus on building its relationship with players and as well as its games and business. EA has since released a statement regarding the layoffs, stating that it took some important steps as a company to address its challenges and prepare for the opportunities ahead. The statement continued, "In addition to organizational changes, we are deeply focused on the increasing quality in our games and services. Great games will continue to be at the core of everything we do, and we are thinking differently about how to amaze and inspire our players." EA confirmed that it was trying to find other roles within the company for displaced employees, and that any workers that were unable to be relocated would be provided severance packages, which some other companies have failed to provide in the past, like when Telltale laid off most of its staff. Still, even with severance packages, layoffs sting. However, the layoffs were reportedly expected for quite some time, according to employees in the affected department. Clearly, EA is looking to make fundamental changes to its business. Lately, the company's moves have hinted at some reformation, including EA skipping E3 2019. How those changes will take shape in the future remains to be seen, but hopefully those affected by the EA layoffs will find even better alternatives for their own futures.
Very sad news. I think this actually hit right around the time we were recording last week, or somewhere around there.
Old news to this point.
But still, I mean, 350 people is not a small number of people. Of course, not the 800.
No.
And, you know, unlike Activision, EA has been hit with a number of stumbles over the last several years. I mean, going all the way back to Anthem's, not Anthem, BioWare's Mass Effect Andromeda, and then Battlefront most notoriously. Yeah. So it makes sense. I mean, they're kind of pulling out of a couple markets here. At least here, they're giving a clear picture of we obviously need to change something to get things to right the ship. Whereas, like with Activision, it was just like, hey, we made a whole lot of money, but we still got to let 800 people go.
Yeah.
It wasn't very clear as to why a lot of these people were being let go, other than the Bungie divorce.
Right.
So, again, 350 people, not a small number, and we hope the best for them. You know, you get to see Twitter light up with the hashtag game jobs, things like that. So it's really, you know, get to see the community come together to bring people to new places.
So it's interesting to think about this, like you said, in respect to the different things that have been going on with EA. And I think the way they went about it is probably the best way they could have gone about it. It says here that most of the people already knew that the layoffs were coming or something was happening, so it wasn't 100% unexpected. And what they could salvage by relocating people, they did.
Right.
And those who couldn't were you know, paid what they were owed.
Sure.
So I mean, as far as all that's concerned, at least they went about it in the right way. Not that it makes it sting any less. But I would say that.
But people weren't blindsided by this,
right?
And you now have like reassurance of you know, either assistance one way or the other, and hopefully they'll find their footing.
Going into the next story, we talked about this a little bit last week, but we have some interesting new news about it. Josh, why don't you?
So last week we had the State of Play, the PlayStation Direct, basically, and they started off with this weird Iron Man experience looking thing, and I've got an article here from Kotaku from Stephen Totillo over at Kotaku with the PS4 exclusive Iron Man VR makes a surprisingly good first impression. Not to me, but according to this person, it did.
So I kind of edited a lot of other stuff out. This pretty much just explains what the mechanics of it and his reactions to the mechanics.
Sure. So it's a truncated version. Make sure you go over to Kotaku and click on the article. So once a player puts the VR on, they're Iron Man, viewing the world in first person as if they're Tony Stark. When I looked down in VR at the start of the demo, I saw Iron Man's arc reactor. The Move controllers in my hands worked as Iron Man's repulsors. If I pointed my palms to the ground and pressed a button, I flew up. If I tilted my hands from my hands to point behind me, I flew forward. At the start of the demo, I was flying off the coast of Malibu, getting in some flight training as well as some target practice. Point your palm toward a target, press a button, and you shoot a blast from your Iron Man gloved hand. Hold a button to lock and swing your arm, and you'll fly. Hold a button to lock, then swing your arm, and you'll fly toward a target and punch it. The shooting and punching immediately felt good. The flying was tricky. It took me some time to figure out I should fly with one hand at my side and shoot with my other arm extended. The game sports 360 degrees of motion, meaning you can turn around as you fly, though I found myself tripping over the VR's headset wire and enjoying this part of the demo the least. Peyton says he and his team have paid attention to the first waves of VR games and have tried to learn lessons about what works and what doesn't. He is especially inspired by Resident Evil 7's VR mode, which he describes as the best game he's played in years and refers to it as life-changing. Peyton also cited that his team's work on prior work on Halo as an influence. Iron Man has more to his arsenal than the palm blast and punches I tried in the demo, he said, as his team is inspired by the sandbox Bungie pioneered in Master Chief's adventures and plans to offer a variety of combat moves. There are no announced voice actors for the game, though Payton teased that the cast would include actors he has worked with in the past. As for the story, it's original to the game, since Iron Man VR, like Marvel's Spider-Man, is exclusive to the PS4. I wondered if they'd be treated as operating in the same universe or even in some larger shared Marvel Games universe. That Payton said is TBD, to be determined. Iron Man VR is slated for release later this year. It's PSVR only.
So that's just following up with our first impressions from the state of play were,
it looked like a 5-10 minute experience. You put you get to fly around, shoot some things, kind of like you did in the Spider-Man VR experience. But according to them, it's not an experience. It's going to be a full game.
Mm-hmm. And some things I didn't include in this, but they talked about how it's not going to be on rails.
Right.
And it's supposed to be kind of a media experience, which I'm really interested in.
Absolutely.
I think now that it sounds more impressive, I'm more interested in trying it out.
I'm definitely looking forward. VR is something is one of those things that's just hard to demo or show in a sizzle reel, and without actually having the headset on, it's just hard to see. I mean, even like looking at the Batman VR, it looks neat, but when you put it on, it feels totally different.
Right.
And you just feel like Batman. So hopefully this kind of fits the void and actually expands on what Batman VR did and actually makes it feel like a real game and not like fly around for 20 hours shooting things.
Right.
So we'll be keeping you updated on that and letting you know when we hear it coming out.
So last week again, there was the announcement that Persona 5 has announced Persona 5R or Persona 5 The Royal for PS4, but now there's another announcement teased for the same date.
Atlas has announced another announcement
that will be announced later.
But not the same announcement that they're going to announce later for Persona 5R. So
yes. So Atlas, the developer of the critically acclaimed Persona 5, this is from Timur Hussein over at GameSpot. Atlas, developer of critically acclaimed Persona 5, has announced it will be revealing something related to the title on April 25th. A website confirming the date of this reveal has appeared online, but there's no indication as to what the studio will be talking about. However, the website intriguingly has P5S in its URL. Atlas has already announced a new version of the RPG for PS4 called Persona 5 The Royal, but this has its own website with P5R in the URL. This suggests that P5S is something separate from the PS4's Persona 5 The Royal. Much of the speculation for what it could be has been around a Nintendo Switch version of Persona 5, and the S in the URL no doubt fuels the fire. Thus, Persona 5 has only been released on the PlayStation hardware. Alongside the PS4 version, there is a PS3 version, which would be suitable for porting to Switch. Additionally, Atlas and Nintendo are already working together to bring Joker, the protagonist of Persona 5, to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as DLC.
And didn't we learn that the voice actor for Joker is the same as the announcer for Smash Brothers?
Yeah.
That's just weird. Of course, you don't hear him talk, but one
times.
line in the whole game. But
yeah. I think it's interesting. And, I mean, anytime there's more news about Persona 5, I'm like, yes. Please.
Yes.
Please give more. I'll take some more.
It won't hurt my feelings to have it on the Switch, but like I said, I still have to play 100 more hours on the PS4 to platinum it.
You see, I'm less interested in buying P5R than I am about buying Persona 5 again on the Switch.
But P5R is going to be potentially something different, unless it's P5RS.
Now, if Persona 5, if P5S is on the Switch and it's also the Royal version, then I don't have anything to worry about.
Right.
But if it's like standard Persona 5 on the Switch, and then there's Persona 5 Royal, then I don't know what I'm going to do.
Right, because we already have Persona 5.
Yeah, but we don't have it on the Switch.
No.
I would play it again.
You can play it anywhere with your iPhone.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I mean, it wouldn't be as difficult to play as some games.
No, because it's just turn-based. And
yeah. But if I'm trying to like sneak around and not get caught by shadows,
I'd imagine it's something you could handle.
Yeah.
And you can connect to the controller, just not a
Yeah, it's true.
not a DualShock 4. But
Yeah.
we'll keep you apprised. All right. So this long-awaited announcement has finally been revealed. Gearbox finally announces Borderlands 3. This is from none other than Jason Schreier at Kotaku. The long-anticipated third Borderlands game is coming. Gearbox said today. This was the 28th, I think.
I don't remember.
Following months worth of hints and teases. Jeez, tongue twister there.
Mm-hmm.
No word on platform or a release date yet. Although publisher 2K Games has suggested that it'll be out within the this coming fiscal year, which ends next April. This is the fourth entry in the critically and commercially successful loot shooting. Come on, Jason, we say looter shooter. Borderlands series. After the first two games and Borderlands the pre-sequel, which came out in 2014, it looks like a whole lot of it looks a whole lot like the other games. This news comes after a difficult past few years for Gearbox, an independent studio in Frisco, Texas, that has seen two high-profile failures this decade. In 2013, it released Aliens Colonial Marines, a poorly received game that has become infamous for a misleading pre-release demo full of flashy fake graphics. And in 2016, Gearbox put out Battleborn, its stab at the hero shooter genre that flopped hard. Now the company will hope to win back jilted fans with a brand new entry and its most successful series to date. Gearbox says there will be more revealed next week on April 3rd.
Which is the day this goes live, so we won't have it for you until next week.
Sorry.
They also, I think, announced a remaster of the first Borderlands.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find, like, everything that happened at this event. I only found this.
Sure. I saw Randy Pitchford for the first time in a long time tweet about kind of like almost navel gazing about the trailer for Borderlands 3. He said, I've been watching this like 100 times, even after seeing it so many times while we were making it. He's like, I don't know if it's that good or if I just think so highly of it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I as you know, taking away from the fact that I'm not particularly interested in Borderlands.
Sure.
But me and a buddy of mine in Chicago, me and Jose, made a short film that all I have from it is a trailer. And I've watched that trailer 100 times. I watched it the other day, and I'm like, damn, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
And I mean, no one's ever going to see it because things happen.
Jose won't finish editing the video.
We don't need to gaslight Jose. We just... But I get that feeling of like being so...
Is it really that good, or is it like...
Is it, you know...
Is it me, you know?
Yeah. So I can't say whether or not it's that good because, one, I haven't watched it, and two, I don't care. For myself. I don't care for other people, though. So
yeah. I mean, all the guys I used to play with on Destiny 1, they were all big Borderlands fans. Mm-hmm. And loved Destiny because of its similarities with Borderlands.
Yeah.
So that leads me to be interested, at least, in trying out a new Borderlands or the remaster whenever it comes out. So.
Yeah. I played a little bit of Borderlands 2 on Vita. But it was so laggy and slow and not good that I didn't get around to it.
Sure.
So
stay tuned.
Sony updates policy to allow refunds on pre-orders. This is from Rebecca Valentine at gamesindustry.biz. Sony has changed its refund policy to allow people who purchase pre-orders on digital titles to have them refunded at any time prior to the release date. In the same change, Sony also now allows refunds of games past the purchase date or release date in the case of pre-orders, for up to 14 days after payment was taken, provided the game has not begun downloading or streaming it. Last year, Sony was one of the several companies on the receiving end of a Norwegian Consumer Council complaint that the digital stores did not adhere to European consumer legislations with their refund policies. The legislation mandates a right of withdrawal where a purchaser can receive a refund for a purchase for 14 days after they make it unless they knowingly waive that right. In this case, stores such as Steam, Origin, and PS Store at the same time did not include a checkbox asking users to consent to losing the right of that withdrawal. The complaint was dropped for all companies involved, save for Nintendo, which is being taken to court in Germany this year over its eShop policy, which does not allow cancellation of pre-orders at all. The case is not expected to be resolved until fall of this year. I wanted to bring this up mainly because that's something I haven't really thought about. I'm trying to think when I bought Spider-Man on my account instead of your account, when we were trying to share the game, I would have wanted a refund so I could
put it on the right
account. But other than that, I can't really think of a reason I would need it. What's weird to me is that I still think of refunds in the old-fashioned way of a few things. I bought the wrong size, or bought the wrong game, or I didn't like it. Now, it's hard to argue that, if you didn't like it, you still bought it. It's like I can't go to a movie. Well, some people can. I don't feel comfortable going to a movie and then not enjoying the movie, and after the movie that I've already watched, go back and say I want my money back because it was terrible.
Sure.
So in the same vein, it's hard to say, but another aspect I wanted to bring up was I feel like this is somehow connected to the GameStop, to the lack of digital codes. Only because it feels like these little things are trying to make PlayStation's infrastructure on the online stuff
more palatable.
More palatable, exactly. And more like an online store, and not this weird thing. I don't even know how to do an analogous thing to say to, but so that's where I'm coming. I mean, obviously this.
I did think it was strange that you couldn't cancel a pre-order on PS4. I never really needed it to, but if we had found out Anthem wasn't going to be what it was, if we had knew ahead of time exactly we probably weren't going to get into this for 6 months, I probably would have saved the money, canceled the pre-order, and then got into it later. But you're just locked in. Now I don't mind giving them my money. It's it's nothing like that. It's just I wasn't going. We got it, and we're not playing it. So we could buy it at a later time, or maybe at a discount. But again, it's just more along the lines of now there's the option to do so, and there's probably an argument to be made that if you're buying something on PlayStation Network, they have access to your data or whatever. If they could see you spent less than 2 hours playing a 40-hour game, maybe they should offer you a chance to at least petition for a refund. Like if I got into Anthem and was like, I played 2-3 hours of this game and it's just not at all what I expected. I'm going through 5 times the loading screens that they told me I was going to be going through, which was none. They said seamless. But if I was just so upset about it that I only played 2 hours and petitioned for a refund, that's probably a policy. If it's not there, maybe it could be there. That might be there now that I think about it, but I'm just not positive.
And that's not something we do very often because research games before you buy them.
Yep, and support developers. So
and I mean, even if I've bought a game that I didn't end up enjoying, I don't really regret buying it for the most part.
Like with Anthem, I have no problem at all supporting BioWare because they made one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. So So even if Anthem's a total miss and they don't ever come back on it, which I've heard is actually not the case. Some of the most recent patches have gotten a lot of praise from people still playing the game. Good. But I just don't have a problem giving them my support.
Yeah. All right, this is 2 more stories. If you're a fan of racing games like Drive Club, is it my turn or your turn?
I don't know. Is it my turn? What was the last story?
It's the refunds.
Okay, so it's my turn.
Yeah.
All right, Sony is shutting down all Drive Club online servers. From Matthew
Handrahan
at gamesindustry.biz.
You can tell I looked these up at the same time.
Yep. I got the other one. What was my story?
I found it before you posted it on Slack.
Sony Interactive Entertainment is shutting down the online servers for Drive Club 5 years after the PlayStation 4 racing game first launched. The shutdown will make all online features in Drive Club VR, and Drive Club Bikes defunct. It will take place on March 31st, 2020, just before midnight British summertime. In a statement, Sony said that all Drive Club games will be playable in single-player offline mode, while acknowledging that they have significant amounts of online gameplay. Features that will no longer work includes using season passes online, engaging with any online multiplayer modes or challenges, creating bespoke events, competing in leaderboards, or sharing stats and progress. In addition, Sony also announced that the online servers for Starblood Arena will also be closed on July 25th, 2019. As an online-only game, it will no longer be playable after that date. So, Drive Club...
Starblood.
Well, Drive Club specifically just had just the awfulest...
Yeah, I feel bad for it for a little bit.
They kind of dropped the ball out the gate. It was supposed to be PS Plus, and then there was partial PS Plus, and it was delayed for like 2 years, and it came out and it was still kind of broken for like another year and a half. And then it finally got like to a place where people were like, "Hey, this game's actually pretty good." And then they had the Drive Club VR. They added the VR support, and that was supposed to be pretty good. But clearly, there's just not enough demand for that game. When Microsoft has Forza Horizon, whatever it is right now, wasn't it nominated for like Game of the Year or something?
Something like that.
When you have just other games in that genre that are just outperforming you, there's just clearly no reason to keep the servers going. But they're going to keep it going for another year and a half. So
yeah,
it's not like no, it's just a year, just another year. But.
So, if you're into those games, I'm sorry If you're into those games, I'm sorry that they're leaving you. But there will be more in time to come.
Yeah,
sure. Last for the Who, What, and Where today. Painterly?
That's what it said.
Painterly I see. Painterly PS4 exclusive Concrete Genie has not one but two PSVR modes. This is from Stephen Talby at Push Square. Concrete Genie might be one of Sony's lesser-known PS4 exclusives, but it's looking really good. Really, rather good. Though it's been in development for a long time, we're starting to understand why that is as the publisher... We're starting to understand why that is, as the publisher is slowly revealing more about the colorful adventure title. On the PlayStation blog today, San Mateo Studios' Jeff Brown tells us a little more about PlayStation VR support in the game, and there's a duo of modes in addition to the main story. Firstly, there's a VR experience in which you guide Genie through a 3D landscape using the game's signature living paint to build virtual reality play spaces. There aren't too many details here, but there are some glimpses of footage on the PS blog post itself, so be sure to take a look. Then there's free paint mode. Using PSVR and two Move controllers, you can stand in one of 4 locations and paint the walls of the dingy town, creating your very own masterpieces inhabited by the titular genies. It sounds like a relaxing experience in the suits concrete Genie down to the ground. The game arrives in the fall of this year, according to the latest trailer. And yeah, so that's cool. Sounds like Microsoft Paint, but in VR.
Mm-hmm.
So, actually, Dreams. It gives me Dreams vibes.
Yeah, probably a highly limited Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
But Concrete Genie looks very beautiful, so that might be kind of neat.
Do you think you're interested in that game? Are you gonna get it?
I don't know.
It's not on my priority list right now.
Sure. It looks really interesting, but I don't know if it's my kind of interesting.
Yeah, if I'm gonna get into a game like that, I'm getting Dreams.
Sure.
And they just announced the other day that the Dreams Creator Beta, or Creator Studio Early Access, is like $30 and comes out on the 18th of April. So I don't know if we talked about that before, but it's happening.
Cool.
And so if I wasn't about to go away for a month, then I would be all in on that.
Should we? Are we going to be able to?
We're going to be able to do.
Okay.
We'll make time.
Well, I just don't know what your schedule's going to be once you're doing that. So.
Well, I'm gonna go work on a movie in May in town. I'm not leaving town. But the last time I did this, I was practically never here.
Right.
So, but we'll make time for it. You can do them solo. We do Ware Josh Weekly.
That would be very uninteresting.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. But this week, we don't have to go into too long. Last week we had an extra long episode, so if you want more of us, you can go click back on that episode. But you started talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
But Jason Schreier from Kotaku just posted a very lengthy, in-depth look at. It's titled "How BioWare's Anthem Went Wrong." And the first time I saw this, I was kind of like, I don't know if one because it's really long, and two is because it's like
it feels like beating a dead horse a little bit.
A little.
And I mean, I don't think Anthem is a terrible or bad game. I think it's got some flaws, and I think what the article goes to do is not to say that this game is trash, the developer's trash, or anything like that, but it provides a unique perspective on how things kind of turned out the way they did.
Yeah, and so that was the first impression of reading the headline. Is like, I don't really want to read another article about someone trashing this game, even as someone who doesn't play it. It's just, but once you start reading what he's talking about,
and knowing Jason Schreier, you know it's not like a trash piece. It's,
right.
You know, he's one of the best in the business,
and so like you see, what probably happened is that he put out some feelers just to ask about something, and he got many of the same responses and found a story here. And so I don't have excerpts from it because it was very long and I read it just before the show. So I highly
I only got through half of it because it's a long.
Yeah,
long
it took me
piece.
about 30 or maybe 20 minutes or so to read it all, and with breaks. But so it details the inception to the completion of what happened to this game, and it doesn't, and like all those things that you said that that we were worried about reading it. It doesn't trash the game. It acknowledges that it had some problems. It's not trying to say that it's better or worse than The Division or Anthem or Destiny, but it puts its place, and it's from the perspective, at least as he says, from the developers of the game, past and current.
Yeah, it said there was it said specifically 19 former and current BioWare employees that were obviously anonymous because none of them had been cleared to speak on the game.
Yeah.
Specifically, so.
So it starts off talking about how the code name for this game was called Dylan, back in 2012, of all time.
Yeah, right after Mass Effect 3.
Yeah. So it was codenamed Dylan, and according to his sources, it's because of Bob Dylan and how they wanted to create something that would make people, reference them for years to come. And then the very last line of the article, spoiler alert, is, I don't think that they found what they were looking, or I don't think it was the way they hoped it would be. And I feel, and it's sad that it begins and ends with that, because, and not in a negative way towards Jason, but in a way that's like, regardless of what happened with that game, it sucks for anyone to have to live. I mean, think about No Man's Sky and the stuff that they've had to live through,
right?
Because of it, and deservedly or not. But anyway, what I wanted to get to is how I titled this section was like video game business practices. A lot of what's detailed in this article, I don't know how much you've gotten into, was talking about the engine being Frostbite, the engine being a very bad engine to work with. People dismissing complaints. Later in the article, it talks about how developers who Jason was speaking to, who saw the feedback for the game once it was announced, they said it looked like reading a laundry list of stuff that we had already tried to bring up, and it seemed like it was just getting brushed away.
Well, then it looked like Destiny, or it looked like it was jumping on the train, or
well, I mean, and
I didn't, like I said, I didn't get that far.
And like, according to Jason, according to these people, like the word Destiny was not allowed to be said, because anytime someone tried to bring it up, it was just like, well, this isn't Destiny. And there was this the point that some people in the development team wanted to make was like, well, if it's not, like, we have to look somewhere, and if Destiny's doing what we're doing and is doing it well, maybe we can look at them and figure out something good. And so they started using like Diablo 3 as a better example for what they were looking for. And so from concept to creation, this game changed so much.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a question, and this hasn't been confirmed, of whether or not it was even meant to be games as a service style game. But a lot of the article illustrates you're working with a bad engine. Complaints that you have that you can see are being neglected, ignored, and there's also this like
sense of indecisiveness.
And because of that, this sense of it'll all work out in the end. And many people he said he spoke to when they heard that, it just meant at the end we're going to be working tirelessly.
Yeah.
And so those are some questions I wanted to flesh out and discuss as two people who have no idea what it looks like that.
Yeah.
But
I did find it interesting. There was one line in the article that was like, there was no one bringing it together.
Mm-hmm.
There was no one person like shepherding this into like a cohesive idea, which sounded a lot like one of my complaints about this game was
sounds like everyone was making a different game.
Everyone was making a different part of the game, and no one was putting it together. Like, you got this really cool story or whatever, but it doesn't really fit into the gameplay of the game. You just go play the game, and then you come back to the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's flying and all this stuff, but it doesn't feel exact with flying with the four other people. You have to go between 3 different loading screens just to go from the fort to actually playing the game. And there was just a whole lot of these different systems that just felt like no one was putting them together.
So there was a lot of that, and and apparently not until the very end when they got Mark Dura to come on as executive producer, who was finally like, this is happening, this is not happening. And while a lot of people saw that as refreshing, at the same time, it wasn't that anyone took that negatively. It was like there were still many things that hadn't been confirmed. So when he was like, yes to this, no to that, it was also like, well, then what do we do about this, and this? Mm-hmm. So very interesting. But our first article we read today was about the EA layoffs, and the Cameron Corliss says video game development has always been a volatile career field, but lately it seems as though developers more than usual have found themselves without jobs due to massive layoffs. And listening to podcasts and reporting on the news since the beginning of the year, it feels like we've said it more than a few times.
I feel like this happened, like just as far as layoff goes, we get these batch layoffs that all of a sudden people soon after like 2 or 3 are like, what is going on in the industry? Is this a sign? But this happens every other year where you have these mass layoffs, and probably more so just a few years ago when you weren't doing live service games. You were just making a game. The game would end, and then
you moved on.
And then people moved on. You cut your staff because there was no reason to have all that staff. Now with these games of service, you build a staff and then you keep them to keep supporting the game. So I don't know that layoffs per se are like increasing in amount, but the size of these layoffs are specifically probably larger than we've seen before.
Mm-hmm. And so, I try to think about this in relation to other industries, and as someone who isn't really familiar with any of them, it's like if you try to, compare it to like movies, it's like I don't even know if this is a fair comparison to try to make, but with what I understand about making movies, they get a crew together to work for a few months, maybe a year, and who knows what happens in that time. Like the lighting designer or the gaffers who come in may not be the same people who end up working on it by the time the movie's over.
Yeah,
they might be, but there's many crew members who come and go. Day players is a lot of what they're called. And I'm curious how much of that really happens in the games industry in a way that it just feels like there's nothing concrete holding you there. Mm-hmm. Like for some reason, when I think about the two industries, and I know they're not always fair to compare,
right?
But if I went to college to study theater and film, and I knew doing that meant that I wasn't guaranteed a stable job.
Right.
But if I had gotten a degree into gaming, my preconceived notions of what it would have been would be like, oh, I'll get a job at a company, and I'll just work with that company making cool video games. But
Yeah.
it seems like that's not how it works.
No, I would assume it's a lot more like movies, where you go from project to project,
Yeah.
unless you find a stable studio that's doing something like Bungie or Naughty Dog, or unless you get on working on a project like Anthem or Destiny, your job is much more in flux. Even if you get on to someone like Rockstar, I would say Rockstar, for the most part, has all their developers in house, or just staying there. But I imagine after Red Dead Redemption 2, they have to scale back a large amount, because there's just not that many. But talking about even scaling up for Anthem, he was talking about how a large number of the developers, of the people who worked on the Frostbite, who were proficient in the Frostbite engine, ended up having to go to FIFA while they were trying to do Anthem, because FIFA had to be moved over to the Frostbite engine because EA wanted it that way. So all these guys over at BioWare who were pretty good at, or proficient in the Frostbite engine, weren't available to the Anthem crew. So anytime they had a problem, they didn't have their go-to guys available, because they were all working on FIFA.
Right.
So
it's a very interesting thing to think about, and there is a difference between the two industries as well. As like most of the crew positions are covered by, can be covered by some sort of union. There's there's IATSE, there's that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. But there's all these different crew unions. There's the DPs union. There's all
and the actors and the directors all have their own.
Yeah, and that's not something. And this is me not trying to have a statement on whether or not games business should have that. But I do think that it's interesting that you don't hear. Well, I haven't heard nearly the amount of complaints about some X, Y, or Z company working on some big motion picture production just let go of half their crew because of X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And that's where it's probably because it doesn't work the same way.
No.
And
because it's not a layoff. You sign on to work on a project, and then at the end of the project, it's over, and it's not a layoff. It's just over.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I didn't think about that. This is almost more of a conversation about teaching me what businesses
Whereas
are.
if I go to work for, I don't know, THQ Nordic, and I'm actually I'm working on Deep Silver's Exodus game, and we had to ramp up. Well, at the end of it, they don't need to ramp up it. They don't need the amount of staff they had, so they cut the staff because they're not quite ready to start production on the next project, or X, Y, or Z. And so but we now have 100 people on staff when we only need 45,
right.
And we've got to make cuts. And those people signed up to work on this, and now it's over. And it doesn't quite work like that. Now it's just I've got to lay off 30% of my staff so we can start working on the next project and not go under for wage requirements.
Now, what do you think about the argument sometimes people make about how maybe instead of laying off all these people, like maybe the CEO can take a pay cut? I've heard different arguments of maybe instead of making all these people lose their jobs, what if we just renegotiate salaries across the board?
Sure. I think in some instances that would work, but I don't think that would ever get rid of layoffs. And I don't think it's necessarily right for every company. Nintendo does that, where Nintendo has their group of their internal studios, and they don't do a lot of layoffs and things like that because they have a number of projects cycling here and there. And then when they don't do well, the CEO could choose to take a pay cut, and because he feels responsible that the Nintendo isn't doing well, and so instead of maintaining his salary, well, he's not performing clearly, so he takes the cut, and instead of laying off half the staff and keeping his pay, he loses his incentive, and it gives him the incentive to push his employees to do well.
Right.
And so instead of, if all, I think one of the presidents or CEOs of Nintendo have said if your employees are in fear of their jobs, they're not necessarily going to be at their best.
Right.
They're going to be, either try hard, over exerting themselves, which means they're fatigued and they're not their best, or they're going to be too worried about losing their job at the end of this project. And so there's something to be said for that. Mm-hmm. Nintendo games typically are very polished, but I don't necessarily know how the crunch and the work process is over there versus at EA, where people felt like this 7-year cycle turned into 2 years of production, and they had to just crank out this game, and weren't able to get an extension on the books because they had to hit their fiscal year or for whatever reason.
Yeah, if they pumped out a few more Star Wars games, they probably would have been able to.
If they would have kept with the Star Wars games they had going, but
no. So that's just a little bit of that. Just some things I wanted to talk about because I think they're important.
Yeah.
We care about people's, well-being.
Livelihoods, and we're just fascinated by the game industry. Mm-hmm. The development process is, it's so hard. Later on in the month, I'm planning on going to VectorCon, which is it's a gaming conference down in Richmond, Kentucky, where I went to school. Where they do student showcase, where they showcase different games that students have made, and they're bringing in a bunch of speakers from Rami Ismail. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's how you say his last name, Ishmael.
I think it's Rami Ismail.
But is there an H?
No.
No. Okay. And Lisa Brown from Bungie.
Yeah.
And one of the Google Cloud. It said
it's at Google Cloud.
Yeah, it's at Google Cloud. I don't know if he's working with the Stadia. I'm
sure that'll be a popular question for him.
I'm sure. And there's going to be more. So I'm very interested to go down there and kind of gets you in the process of, seeing how these games are made. I did one or two semesters of the game development, degree, only because it started my last year of college, so I couldn't do more.
Oh yeah.
So. And I did go to the VectorCon and all that stuff, and it was really neat. But game development is hard. And the one semester or whatever I did of it, it was not easy getting a handle on Unity and the programming and all that stuff. But that's just from someone who doesn't do any of that.
Right.
So.
Well, before we go, we want to go through next week's games. So real quick, there's not very many major announcements, but Super Dragon Ball Heroes World Mission comes to PC and Switch on April 5th. Dangerous Driving comes to PC, PS4, and Xbox One on April 9th.
That's the game I was listening to the Game Informer podcast, and that's from the creative director, one of the original founders of the Criterion, the guys who do
you mentioned that,
who do the Burnout series, and most recently have worked on the Need for Speed series and things like that. And so he's headed up a team of 7 people, and they've started developing Dangerous Driving in August, and now they're releasing it. So they've pumped out a game in 7 months, and the way he talks about it, there's this thing, it's called persistent crashes. And so, you'll have an accident, and then when you come back around, the accident's still actually there on the field.
Oh wow!
And that gives you another angle of maneuvering. You have to remember that there's a crash there.
Oh,
and you can actually use it as a takedown.
Oh, that's cool.
So he said if you take someone down into a crash, it's called a junkyard crash. But if you run into it yourself and crash, it's called I forget it. It's some self.
Oh.
Self-mutilating or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not that, but it sounded interesting. I haven't really seen anything about it, but I'll be sure to check it out.
There you go. Hearthstone Rise of Shadows comes to PC on April 9th. Anything about that?
I mean, I'm assuming it's just the card game expansion. I guess it's coming to mobile as well.
Well, you played a lot of Hearthstone.
I did play a lot of Hearthstone, but
nerd.
Yep.
Shovel Knight Showdown and Shovel Knight Trevor Trove. Well, Shovel Knight Showdown comes to PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch on April 9th. And Shovel Knight Treasure Trove comes to PS4 and Switch on April 9th. And that's the compilation game, I believe.
Okay.
Treasure Trove, I believe.
Cool.
And that's the show for this week for Ware Gaming Weekly. Remember, you can find us on Twitter at WareGaming_. You can find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/WareGaming_. You can tweet at me at SpeakNicklish.
You can tweet at me at Jaws1015.
And until next week,
Say goodbye, Nick.
Bye, Nick.